Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can't hear me, please tell me you can hear me. I'm going to go through my daily news video as I normally would in a pre-record, but due to extenuating circumstances of having children that decide to want to play sports, I had to go out and spend some family time with them doing sporty stuff. And so I am now back in the seat, so to speak, and ready to do some Ukraine war news. It's not because I was deeply upset about last night's semi-final rugby score. I was deeply upset. I am deeply upset. We was robbed by South Africa. Those Saffers. Absolute robbery that took place. There were two high tackles in the last minute of the match that should have been called. Not to blame the ref, but come on, ref. And the ref didn't seem to be able to understand how to referee scrums. But, you know, aside from that, well done, South Africa. Not well done. I am bitter. That's why I'm wearing my All Blacks rugby top here, just because you know what's going to happen in the final. At least, hopefully, righteousness will reign and the All Blacks will win the World Cup. No offense, South Africa. Offense, South Africa. Anyway, none of you need to know about that. I'm here. Yes. So let's go. And I'm actually, before I start with the news, I am going to be joined by Matt hopefully soon because he's so good at curating the discussions, the comments that come in the live. So really appreciate him doing that. And he's going to pop in from the great nation of Australia. That I won't mention their appearance at the World Cup rugby because they went home early with their tail between their legs. Anyway, I'm going to have just a swig of tea. By the way, look at this merchandise you can grab off some link somewhere, and you know, whatever. Oh, good. Right. So what we're going to do is the normal stuff that we do, talk through the losses, try and find some evidence that kind of supports those loss statistics, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I have to now change screens. So if I look sideways every now and again, that's why. So these are the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. The caveats are normally in the description to my videos below, but I think on this live, I haven't pulled across the correct description. So the caveats aren't in there, but you know what the caveats are. These are Ukrainian general staff figures. So yeah, it's pretty obvious. 980 personnel lost for the Russians is ticking back up to phenomenal numbers. Phenomenal, not like awesome. Hey, lots of people have died, but like just these are incredible numbers. We've seen numbers over the last week that have shown, I think, an understanding that what's going on, in particularly in Avdiivka, is not great for the Russians, and I'm pretty sure that that's going to be part of that. 18 tanks and 19 armored personnel vehicles are high numbers, obviously not the numbers that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 days. I don't think you'll. I mean, I'll be amazed if we have days that match those numbers again in this war, because, well, for lots of reasons. I mean, do the Russians have that number of pieces of equipment they can throw into the mix in the way they have done in Avdiivka, with all the complaints we've heard from Russian sources about Avdiivka? I don't know. But also, will they, you know, even if they do have that, surely they're going to learn from their mistakes. They've had Vuhledar and they've had Avdiivka. If you're going to try the same thing again at a different time and place, but the same kind of tactics, you really don't learn, right? But 18 tanks and 19 armored personnel vehicles, that's a terrible day of losses. I mean, as I always say, if the UK army lost 18 tanks in a day, that's us pretty much combat ineffective. Yeah, 15 artillery systems is not the highest we've seen, but we have been given stats over the last, well, actually, if you're talking about artillery, I'd say the last 3 months where the numbers have been on days in the upper 40s. That is just an incredibly high number of artillery pieces to lose. So when you have a day like 15 artillery pieces, you're thinking, My goodness, that's low. That's not low. That is still a really bad day. 3 multiple launch rocket systems, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. And here we go with Matt joining. Thanks, Matt.
Oh, hey, evening all.
Hey, hey,
What's
hey.
how are you?
Welcome to. I'm all right, thank you. I have had, as I said, a long day doing family stuff. So apologies for the delay, but thank you so much for helping out, mate. It really does make a difference.
Oh, my pleasure. Just finished cooking roast beef for dinner, so had that, and I'm free now.
Job good, and lucky you. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I was just going through the stats. We're 2 drones, 9 drones. I don't know if that refers to last night, but probably the night before. 13 vehicles and fuel tanks. So that is fairly low, actually, considering some of the numbers that are posted on a daily basis, and 1 piece of special equipment. So those are daily figures. As you can see, very high in the personnel front and high across the mechanized equipment and artillery systems. So I think that is symbolic of Russia having a tough time of it, even though the I guess if we go and look at the map, even though things aren't changing hugely at the moment on the front line, there is an understanding that Avdiivka has been particularly difficult for them. But we'll pop into the front line. I haven't done my front line research, so I'm just going to show you the map today in this live, and then I'll go away and do a bit more research and find out what's happened. Thank you so much to JR, who has updated the map. What a legend. So to support those figures that we've just been through, we have the Kyiv Independent here saying the UK Defence Ministry, with their sort of daily intelligence updates and whatnot, saying that the Russian troops have likely suffered up to 190,000 permanent casualties in Ukraine. Up to 190,000 Russian troops have likely been killed or permanently wounded in Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion, according to UK Defence Ministry. I mean, this is a really big claim here. Total number of Russia's casualties, including those who are recovering and are due to return to the battlefield, is up to 290,000 troops, the ministry said. So when we go back to what Ukraine has claimed of personnel losses, you find that 290,000 is the number. Now, I know we have this argument all the time. We have it here in the threads on my channel, is what does the 290,000 personnel mean? So we had the term liquidated personnel previously. That was changed to personnel because I think liquidated, well, I don't know. It could be that it was just the wrong word to use, that it was a poor translation, or ended up being misconstrued.
No, the translation was actually liquidated.
Yeah, sorry.
So the
Although
actual
the
Ukrainian
word,
meant
yes.
liquidated. Yeah.
Yeah, but sorry. So the claim is that, or the claim has been that that was the wrong word to have
Mm.
chosen, that then translated across to something in English that might not have been what was originally intended. That's what some people say. I really don't know. I flip flop around on this.
Um,
What are your thoughts?
from my understanding of the language, and speaking to my wife, brother-in-law, father-in-law, all that, it was actually meant to come across as liquidated, because these were invaders. These were people destroying their country. So it was meant to be
Mm.
a harsh terminology. And yes, the West didn't like the fact that, it meant killing people. But what do you do when someone invades your country? So,
And so, I mean, you still have though the argument. So the BBC on multiple occasions have said very explicitly that this refers to wounded, this refers to casualties and deaths. And so I know some people say no, this is definitely deaths, but there still is this element of not 100% sure it definitely is deaths. And I'm sure people in the comments will say no, it really is. But there are people like the BBC, and they are doing loads of research in with Mediazona with regard to finding out the benchmark minimum deaths through social media. So they are involved in doing a lot of these statistical research into the deaths. So when they say, yeah, we think it refers to casualties, then that makes me pause a little bit. So again, I'm not wholly sure. And then when the UK Ministry, Defence Ministry comes out and says, we think 290,000 refers to deaths and casualties, I don't know. I mean, lots of people still say that 290,000 people dead might be even a conservative estimate as well. I've had that discussion on my threads as well. So who knows? What are your thoughts? It's so difficult, actually, with us sitting online going, well, I think this many people have died, right? But what are your thoughts generally on the sort of death statistics?
I think they're pretty accurate. My personal take on the liquidated is people who can no longer fight or be productive
Yeah,
in the way that we normally
yeah.
term it. Um, I think they're pretty accurate because, like you, we've seen the battlefields.
Mm.
You can play, you know, how many bodies can you count before you want to go run to the toilet and vomit? Um, there's a lot of Russians just dying there. So yeah, I think the numbers are accurate.
So this is what the intelligence update actually says. Recent Russian assaults on Avdiivka have contributed to a 90% increase in Russian casualties recorded by the Ukrainian MOD. I'm not quite sure how that number is tallied. What we have seen from the general staff figures is moving from sort of 400, maybe up to 500 at times, to moving to a sort of 1,000 a day. So that's definitely a big increase there, and that's probably what they're referring to, that kind of 90% up. So if you have 100% increase, that's a double, and that's pretty much a double from what we've seen. So that's probably what they're talking about with a 90% increase in Russian casualties. But they use the term casualties, which, although some people intuitively think casualty means dead, actually casualties technically means dead and wounded. Anyway, since February 2022, Russia has significantly increased its force footprint on the ground in Ukraine by intensifying recruitment using financial incentives and a partial mobilization conducted in autumn 2022. This increase of personnel is a major factor behind Russia's ability to both defend held territory and conduct costly assaults. It is likely that Russia has suffered 150 to 190,000 permanent casualties, and brackets very specific here, killed and permanently wounded. So that is your, I don't know, maybe how you're defining liquidated, sorry, I almost said liquidated personnel there, Matt, since the conflict began. And the total figure, including temporarily wounded, recovered, and due to return to the battlefield in some capacity, in the region of 240 to 290,000. This does not include Wagner Group or their prisoner battalions who fought in Bakhmut. So that's interesting. So the UK Defence Intelligence Update is saying that 150 to 190,000 like long-term casualties that won't be fighting anytime soon. But that doesn't include Wagner. And we've heard from Prigozhin when he was alive that, Wagner suffered, goodness, what was it in the end that he said? Was it 30,000 dead at
I think
least?
it was, yeah.
And then, or maybe even more than that, plus the casualty, plus the wounded, and then you have the penal battalions as well. So who knows what these numbers are? But these are on the higher end of some of the claims, and these will be taking into account things like what BBC and Mediazona are doing. We're taking into account what the general staff are saying, and all these different intelligence and open source claims that are about, and this is what the UK intelligence says. And I'm quite surprised they've gone out on a limb and said I think these are relatively high numbers for what we've heard from other intelligence outfits previously. What are your thoughts there, mate?
Just Potato just posted that there was 10,750 since October 11th. Yeah,
That's
that's
massive, isn't it?
yeah, that is absolutely huge.
And
Yeah, sorry, I just got completely left fielded by that. Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
actually, like Dell, who does the one, he's on OneDrive in the description below. I don't know if it's description to this video, but all my normal videos will have Dell's Excel spreadsheet that tots up the general staff figures. And I am due, I keep promising, but this week I think I'm going to do a video going through those figures again, just to see the effect of the certainly the last week or two on those stats. So as we then go to equipment losses as opposed to personnel losses, Andrew Perpetua says, this is just, I think, indicative. said in the last 10 hours that, I posted my map update, no significant changes, but most of my day was spent going through a backlog of destroyed vehicles from the past 2 weeks. I didn't keep count exactly, but I added something like 50 more destroyed and abandoned Russian vehicles. It was a lot. So he's still tossing up. So in one of his recent live streams is like, I'm still counting losses from the 10th of October on the equipment losses for the Russians. It is that significant. And that's why I keep talking about it, because it is an absolute nightmare for the Russians, it seems. And then this is the list he has done, which I presume includes what is counting, or unless the 50 is this list. But you can see the ratio here. And he has gone out of his way many times to say, look, I'm looking at 2/3 Russian video feeds, 1/3 Ukrainians, Telegram channels and video feeds and whatnot. And this is still what he's finding. This is telling you a story. And the story is that the Russians are taking huge losses. Now, what we are seeing here is a huge number of boats. And again, that tells us a story, because we keep hearing of activity happening in Kherson, down in this area near Krinky or at Krinky, and then further down around Pischanivka and Poima. Now, although there's still a big unknown about exactly what's taking place there is a lot of activity going on in the Kherson area on the Dnipro River, and this tells you that, doesn't it? Then we've got artillery, tanks, IFVs again, and a lot of trucks and a lot of civilian vans and trucks, which I think tells you its own kind of narrative there, which to me, reading between the lines, would be possibly struggling to find other targets. So I think, and this is pure speculation, let me know what you think, Matt, but I think the Ukrainians have now got so many drones and so many drone operators. United 24, for example, have raised a phenomenal amount of money and are piling in resources to the Ukrainians, as well as all these other sources. They, I think, have a lot of drones able to operate. And when you have that many drones, and we've seen the lists of equipment taken out over the last 3 months, then these drones are also able to travel further. So we're hearing about 17-kilometer ranges rather than 10-kilometer ranges. You will start seeing other targets being hit, because they're looking for targets. Again, speculation. They're looking for targets and can't find your self-propelled guns that are hiding in tree lines because they've been blown up. And the Russians are then complaining about lack of counter battery fire. This all fits together. So the drone operators are still there. The drone operators haven't been blown up. They've still got drones. They are going and looking for stuff. And what they're finding are Bukankas, life vans and SUVs, and hitting them. Whereas 3 months ago, they would have been not looking for them and looking for tanks instead and going for the higher value targets. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, look, it's I just got completely sidetracked just at the end there. I had my whole answer for you. The targets are going to be a lot less at the moment, as the greenery's hiding so much more. There's going to be the whole front line has deteriorated in what Russia's actually got close. So as your battery's running out, if you're going to stray your FPV drone further over the maximum range to be able to safely come back, you're just going to be going for any target you can at the end there. And I think that's what's happening now, is they're being forced to actually take those drones a lot further than ever before, just to find anything. I haven't actually, I haven't spoken to anyone about that aspect of it. So I can't give you a definitive nudge, nudge, wink, wink answer on that, but that makes a lot more sense to me. It's just a lack of targets up close. And I also think you're going to see a lot more FPV drones being used to attack the trenches coming up over the next 2 months, as all the foliage dies off and the trenches are exposed, and
Good point.
the trenches fill up with water. So those deep trenches, the Russians won't be able to go down into the deep trenches anymore. So they're going to be forced to come up, and then you're going to get a lot more hitting of those trenches with drones.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think, goodness, the trench warfare in the winter, autumn going into winter, is going to be pretty horrific, isn't it? But yeah, I think the lack of foliage is going to be important going forward, along with the weather. It's interesting listening to, again, Andrew Perpetua's live stream the other night, talking about when, for those of you who cruise around Telegram and Twitter looking for video footage for the war to give you a kind of contextual understanding, or just because that's what you're interested in. He was saying that if you get choppy video feeds that from a drone, from either a first person view drone or a looking down drone, choppy feeds usually mean that drone has been shot down after it's done its thing, right? So if it's dropping an IED or doing some spotting, and it's a choppy feed, it's because it's been recorded from, say, the tablet as the feed's coming back. So the quality isn't as good. If the drone comes back, you take the card out, the memory card out, and you've got the top quality feed, top quality footage of the drone activity. But if it's choppy footage, it means that drone was shot down after it got the footage or was lost or whatever. So I thought that was a nice little nugget of information. But as you can see here, not a lot of Ukrainian equipment taken out, which is, from a pro-Ukrainian point of view, pretty good news. This seems to be like, I've got a couple of posts here that look like Oryx posts. So I don't know. I did hear a rumor that Oryx is still doing stuff. I'm not 100% sure. Have you heard anything, Matt?
No.
Okay.
I'm not a Twitter person, so
yeah. Fair cop. So here we have the total losses at Berdyansk and Luhansk air bases, according to, it looks like, Oryx. 15 Ka-52 attack helicopters, 7 destroyed, 8 damaged. 9 Mi-8, 2 destroyed, 7 damaged. Note, helicopters labelled as beyond repair have been, for now, listed as just damaged to be on the safe side. But those that look like the one we got a partial image of are likely total losses. We just don't have sufficient evidence to list them as destroyed. So actually, it could be even worse than that in terms of damaged and destroyed. But that is, a significant loss of helicopters. I know we talked about that lot already. And then just another list from Oryx here of stuff destroyed, just an awful lot of kit, 118 in total, including helicopter losses. Just, they are losing a lot of kit. I mean, we know this already. It's just, these are other sources, and it's not just Andrew Perpetua, it's not just general staff. It just gives you a picture that, do you know what, stuff is happening, and it's happening with alarming regularity if you're a Russian. Here we have some footage here. I mean, I get in trouble for showing footage, but just to give you a sense of, evidencing these claims, rare nighttime footage of the destruction of at least 2 Russian S-19 Mr. S-152 mil self-propelled howitzers. As a result of the strikes, the munitions dropped from the UAVs, with munitions dropped from UAVs by the Ukrainian military. The 2 strikes resulted in secondary explosions due to internal ammunition detonations. Those are Mr. S's. I don't know if they feature on, so that's not anything on Andrew Perpetua's latest stats. I don't know timestamp for that. But what I thought was interesting is, one, they're still hitting self-propelled guns, which are going to be high value targets, and 2, it's the thermal imaging or the nighttime imaging on these drones, which means that, hey, they're not just flying in the daytime and causing trouble, they are flying at night as well. And then here's another video that just shows you the sheer volume of equipment that's been on the move near, this is presumed near Avdiivka from Null reports. National Guard Unit Omega shows how a Russian column is coming under Ukrainian fire. Just, a lot of kit moving. As you can see, 2 different rows converging here. You got kit, you got humans. This is prime area for massive targeting. I mean, I would be, as you can see, something's hit there, something's hit there. I would be like throwing HIMARS into that area if you could be as quick and reactive as that. I don't know if HIMARS can do that, react as quickly. But I mean, gee whiz, that's a lot of kit there and coming under a lot of fire, but I can't really show you stuff. But this, again, feeds into the number of pieces being taken out. Yes, Matt?
Well, why are they so close?
This is a really good point. So I think, I don't know what doctrine is, what training is, but I'm fairly sure that is way too close.
Well, we were slamming, or not we, but the Western media was slamming Ukraine for traveling further apart than that.
Yeah.
And that's really close, really close.
Yeah, so you've got 5 vehicles there in, I'm guessing here, but maybe 50 meters, where some people say, that should be the gap between vehicles. I mean, you hear different things, but then you've got 2 other vehicles here within that same
Mm.
range as well. So if you put a HIMARS right there, of course these are moving, and unfortunately that's not so easy. So you wouldn't really be able to do that. But just imagine, or some kind of ATACMS here, you have taken out a massive load of equipment in one fell swoop because they are that close. But even if you're peppering it with artillery, even if it's not precision guided artillery, the fact that they're that close means that you can aim for there and have a pretty high probability of getting at least something. So that's not good training there, or that's not
No,
good skills.
no. You look. You actually expect them to be coming in at high speed with 50 meters between them, and that way one artillery shell isn't going to take multiple units out. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty. I think who was it? Someone just said bad training or buffoons or something like that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, I missed it.
quite.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Can I just say thanks to Gregory Nitsky? Like, okay, right, let's get this out of the way, guys, before we go on to the next video. Let's get this out of the way. South Africans, yeah, feel free to have it over me today, but today only, and then cut it out, right? Or we come to blows. No, thank you, Gregory. Really appreciate that. Boca, yeah, brilliant. And then, on the one hand, Mark, thank you so much. It's absolutely amazingly generous. Softens the pain from what we did to you on the pitch last night. So we know where Mark Gould stands with South Africa against England. So thank you, Mark. I will bite my tongue because your generosity is like incredible. But ouch. Anyway, okay. So let's move back to this. So I'll probably get in trouble for showing this, or not least because it's got music blaring over it. Well done, me. Awesome. So I don't know if this is real time, but there's a couple of things to note here, which is how slowly that that drone is moving, and then it goes into the back, and that's a really big explosion. So I don't know what's going on there. Really, almost looks like this is set up. But anyway, yeah, drones blowing up stuff. That is pretty catastrophic, and whatever that thing is ain't going to be moving much going forward. Right. What else can I say? No, that's actually nothing. So we're going to move on to distance strikes. Is there anything you want to say about losses, Matt, at all?
No, no.
No. Cool beans. Okay, so going on to distance strikes. Last night, Russia launched or attacked Ukraine with missiles and drones. All Shahed drones and a single KH-59 were shot down. I don't know if that means that's only one KH-59 was shot down out of one. In addition, 3 out of 4 Lancets were shot down. Russia also launched 8 S-300 missiles. And it's these S-300 that seem to do much more of the damage at the moment, although they also appear to be hitting a lot of civilian infrastructure as well. Information about the destruction is being clarified, said NEL reports much earlier this morning. So, yeah, that's happened. One of the biggest things that happened yesterday or last night was a Russian strike on Nova Pochta terminal. So this is the post office terminal, post delivery terminal in Kharkiv district, killing 6 people and hospitalizing 14 others. Yes, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to say it's New Post.
Yeah.
Yeah, spent many an hour in there collecting my goods. Well,
Yeah.
maybe not that one, not the main terminal, but yeah.
Yeah, so this has been met with a lot of disgust because it is civilian
Actually, I tell
infrastructure.
a
Yeah,
lie. I picked up my wedding suit from there.
there you go.
So yeah, there
Personal
you go.
connection.
Yep.
Because to remind or to let people know if they don't know, I've interviewed Matt formally before. He is a viewer, a subscriber and member of the channel. Thank you so much, Matt. But he's also used to live in Kharkiv with his Ukrainian wife, and they and child escaped via Romania to Australia, where he is now. So that was at the beginning of the war, right at the front end. So so he knows of this establishment.
Yes.
So, as Tim White says, let's start with the latest details of last night's horrific attack on the postal delivery center in Kharkiv. 6 people died in Novopochta building and 14 were injured, 2 of whom were fighting for their lives. Bodies are so distorted they had to be identified by DNA. I've seen some not nice stuff from this strike. It is a bad strike. And again, it's the question of, right, if this is an S-300 missile, which knowing Kharkiv it probably is, to remind those who don't know, or to remind people, or to tell people who don't know, an S-300 is a surface-to-air missile system used often by the Russians in its secondary mode, in a ground-to-ground mode, surface-to-surface mode, but it's less accurate in that mode. And as a result, you wonder whether they were aiming for somewhere like this, or aiming for a military target or hit this, or aiming for some other target and hit this. There are so many options. None of them are good for Russia, because the question is, why are you using a wholly inaccurate missile to do this? Is this therefore a war crime? Because you could use something much more accurate. But then you get into this whole gray area of like, well, if they know that another missile, say a more accurate cruise missile, has a higher probability of being shot down because of the trajectory of a cruise missile against the trajectory of a ballistic surface-to-air missile, then is there justification for using this, that it's less likely to be shot down? So it's going to be more successful, but it's also going to be less accurate. How does that fit with proportionality and excessiveness in terms of how you measure war crimes in hitting somewhere like this? I mean, either way, it doesn't look good for Russia, that's for sure.
There's from my memory, there was nothing military anywhere near around the actual terminal there. A railhead maybe, but
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think it's still a bit of distance from it. So
I mean,
yeah.
how much can you get away with just claiming you thought there was something military, or making up some kind of intelligence? I guess this is how war crimes tribunals take place, and they have to present evidence. The Russians, if they ever go to court, of course, whether anyone will actually end up going to the Hague, or whether it would be done in absentia. And actually, I'm interested as to when such court cases will take place. I know they're already collating an absolute ton of evidence with regard to war crimes in a way that we've rarely seen before. So usually you wait till wars have finished before you go in and start trying to gather evidence to prosecute people. But this is a rare, if not the first occasion, whereby they are collecting massive amounts of evidence during the war, and there are lots of people involved in that process in Ukraine at the moment doing that. But yeah, not a good sight there at the post office. And indeed, I don't. There it is. Explosion. I don't really want to show that. But yeah, here you can see explosion taking place at the post office site there as a missile hits it. So you've got all the evidence there that the post office was hit in a way. It seems. The question is, does that constitute a war crime? I mean, I know which side of the fence I would sit in that one. They also, at night and in the morning, Russians carried out 3 attacks on border communities in Sumy. That's in the northern area of Ukraine. 22 explosions were recorded in a number of places. And also, the ISW said, oh, sorry, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, down here, Cheryl actually put in a comment. Russians keep telling us they intend ethnic cleansing. Why don't we believe them?
That's such a good point, Cheryl. So when you hear, if always try and put myself in the shoes of the other person, whoever I'm talking about. So if I was the Kremlin, how would I try and get out of this, right? If that was my job, was to get out of being done for war crimes, which is like a horrible thing to think about, right? But I would say something like, well, that's a propagandist on TV, and that's not actually what the military were thinking or doing. However, I would argue, like Cheryl, is like they are very clearly signposting this on national television, that they are intending, they've got all the genocidal rhetoric you could ever want or not want to hear, more accurately, and they tell you that very openly. So yeah, quite, why should we doubt that they are committing war
That's
crimes?
just actually on that point as well. There's a disconnect between what Ukraine's expecting from the war and what the West, I think, is expecting from the war. And I don't think, when these pro-Russian idiots keep going, oh, well, let's do a compromise, let's come up with a truce of some kind. I honestly don't think they've ever sat there and spent 5 minutes watching Russian TV going, looking at the point where the Russians are saying, we want to kill every Ukrainian, we'll drown their kids, we'll burn them alive, we'll, do whatever it is. It is a genocidal war. And everything else aside, it must be a genocidal war just in the context of the average Russian man going to war to kill Ukrainians, although they don't know why they're there, but they're still willing to go and kill Ukrainians.
I've been having a discussion with someone on YouTube known as Weibin, WI-BIN, and then on Twitter, because they were having a go at me for not reading their comments, but for some reason, and I know this is happening a lot to other people, that there appears to be lots of shadow banning of people. It's nothing to do with me. God knows what YouTube does with people's comments, but so many people complain that their comments are being deleted or they're being shadow banned. You rest assured, it is not me. So I really apologize for that. I don't know what I can do. But one example is someone who made a big criticism against me and then had a go at me for not answering the criticism. And that's because I never saw the criticism because YouTube deleted it, but then they said they could still see it. And there's a really weird situation. Anyway, the long and short of it is that he has this case, which has been broadly taken from elsewhere that I can find. I think The Hill did an article on this, which is you can vote out Russia on a majority vote in the UN from the UN Security Council seat. I think there is some way that it can be done, and I need to look into the details of this and spend some time trying to get my head around it. But I think there needs to be some ballsy attempt by the international community, political community, to actually unseat Russia from that UN Security Council so that they can't, it's just what a bizarre situation when they are perpetrating such terrible acts to be sitting on the Security Council permanent seat. And there are all these arguments we can have about, they inherited that seat from the Soviet Union, from USSR. And actually, you could argue that Ukraine has as much right to that seat as Russia does, because it was almost just assumed. There was no formal way, as far as I understand it, that the Russian Federation took that permanent seat from the USSR. They was like, the USSR don't exist anymore, and they're like, and so that seat's ours. But Ukraine could be like, well, actually, we were part of the USSR as well, and so why isn't that seat ours and not yours? So there are those arguments you can have about their seat there, and all sorts of different things. But this approach seemed to be that there is a genuinely bona fide way that nations can just majority vote Russia out of that seat or something. And again, I need to look into it, but I'm sure people in the thread can let me know if that's something that's viable. With regard to going back to missiles and drones and whatnot, the ISW reports that Russians are resorting to combined attacks to find weaknesses in the Ukrainian air defense. So this is something that has definitely been the case for a very long time. And occasionally you get nights like pretty much last night, where you've got very few missiles and drones being sent. And the reason is, well, why would you do that if that one missile is going to be shot down? What's the point of doing that? Surely you would be going for saturation missile attacks. So therefore, there has to be a rationale behind that. Otherwise, it's just sheer stupidity, which I wouldn't put it past them. But realistically, it's going to be because they're finding where the air defenses are weak. And even if it does get shot down, it's telling them something. And the Ukrainians do this as well. So the ISW has analyzed that data released by Ukrainian defense forces and concluded that most likely Russia is preparing for winter attacks, combining missiles, guided bombs, and drones that are used to strike the Ukrainian rear to find weaknesses in the Ukrainian air defense. That's nothing particularly like groundbreaking there. Well, it actually physically is groundbreaking, but that is what they're doing, and it's what they do oftentimes.
On your comment about Russia being removed from the UN, I just pulled up ABC, which is our equivalent of your BBC. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you remember it from your days here.
Mm-hmm.
And that just says the UN Charter does not outline a way to remove a permanent member of the Security Council. However, a country can be removed from the United Nations General Assembly via a vote based on the recommendations of the Security Council. So basically, Russia has to vote
To vote
to sack
itself out.
itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get all the stuff that was I'll probably do an extra on this to having a look at it, see if I can get my head around it, see, because I presume they would have known about this, and whoever presented this on the Hill article certainly knew about this. So yeah, just on that shadow banning thing, Smith, JP, I know it has nothing to do with you. It was awful being banned for spam and deceiving practices. Me, okay. Now I hope so. I'm really sorry to hear that, Smith. And just is that a case of trolls reporting people and the kind of the normal mechanisms being gamed, a bit like I was claiming about my own channel, which is still like it's not perfect, but it's so much better. But yeah, I'm so sorry that people have experienced that.
Before we
As you
move
said,
on,
yeah,
everyone, just go and hit the like button. I've
always
been told by Talking Bloke to remind everyone.
absolutely.
So
Thank
there
you.
you go. Thank you.
So other places have been hit by distance strikes. So we have explosions in Melitopol, Sevastopol, Berdyansk, and Donetsk last night. Losses of Russian artillery in the Zaporizhia region are 5 times greater than the Ukrainian ones, says the Wall Street Journal. Which is, I wonder where they get those stats from. It might just be drafted from the kind of general staff stats, but trying to work out what the Ukrainian losses are is as we know, a very difficult thing to do. Okay, we have talking about those strikes on occupied territories. Crimea was hit several times yesterday. Smoke was rising near a military base, actually, near Simferopol. So, yeah, the usual kind of activity there. Second appearance of mysterious smoke in Crimea at Balaclava. The invaders are definitely not electing a new pope. Interesting. And Tim White then continues, Ukraine is keeping operational silence on developments in Kherson region, where reported Russia's mill blogger views earlier. The occupiers have mainly been shelling coastal regions, presumably from where they believe Ukraine's supplying the forward troops. So this is strikes that a lot of aerial bombs are being dropped along that Kherson, that Dnipro River area, because, well, not reading between the lines, that would we can safely assume that the Ukrainians do have some kind of purchase on a broadly 20-kilometer, maybe even longer stretch of the Dnipro from the Antonivsky Bridge and further up the river towards Krinky, there or thereabouts. So, yeah, that the Russians are using their aviation quite a lot there, which they have done for a long time, to be honest. And other strikes as well. Residential places getting hit all over the shop. Tim White always has a good list of these kind of places that get hit. So yeah, the Russians are still doing their stuff, and the Ukrainians also hitting places such as here we have Rostov in Russia. So they're still sending things across the border, drones across the border to hit Russian targets in a number of places. You never quite know what they're aiming for, how much they succeed. They do this very often, and we don't always get good views of what took place. And then Donetsk in the occupied territories, as mentioned, was hit. There's quite a lot of talk about the one in Donetsk yesterday. I don't really know what was hit there. And then Belgorod region. So Krasnaya Yaruga in the Belgorod region, it's business as usual, says no reports. So why I wanted to play you the sound of that is that's clearly not a drone, right? So that's a missile strike or some kind of projectile similar to that hitting somewhere in Belgorod. Again, that is north of Ukraine here. So you've got Kursk and Belgorod. This is Belgorod here. That is Kursk. and Bryansk Oblast. So they're the three that if you're going to see Russia get hit, it's usually those three. Although we have just heard Rostov, which is down here, being hit as well. So yeah. Anyway, that's strike in Belgorod, and this interesting because I don't know if anyone else has seen any evidence, but I'm fairly sure this is the first evidence I have seen of a HIMARS rocket being taken down, a HIMARS missile being taken down by air defenses, or they. So the Russians claim routinely that they take down HIMARS rockets. It's such a common occurrence that we took X amount of HIMARS rockets down, and they never give you any evidence of this happening. And this is the first I recall seeing. Whether it was taken down by air defense or whether it fell out of the sky and malfunctioned, I don't know. So there is that option. But this is apparently a HIMARS rocket, so maybe air defense has been able to take down one. But if you think of how many HIMARS have been fired over the course of the war since HIMARS were introduced, and it's not just HIMARS. So HIMARS are the wheeled version. You've got the tracked version as well, the M270, that does the same kind of stuff. But we hear about the Russians doing this all the time. The evidence is one so far, and even then, we don't know if it malfunctions. So there you go. There is that.
That's a really weird looking missile. Two separate parts of the missile body. It actually looks like it's separated in the air.
Could well have done. Whether it's separated because it was hit, I wouldn't be able to tell.
No.
I don't know enough about that, but nevertheless, the Russians claim they shot it down, and could well have done.
They could have.
Yeah,
If you put enough lead into the air, you're going to hit something.
Yeah, eventually you're going to, yeah, exactly. So now we're moving on to other bits and pieces. So a former MP in Russia who's been a senior figure in many opposition parties is the latest about to be charged with discrediting the army. The classic kind of get rid of all of your opposition, and then that leaves a power vacuum, and Putin has no one to threaten him. And as I've said before, he does that within his own party. So United Russia, how many very strong politicians are there? If you think about Gerasimov and Shoigu, who even the Russian army personnel slag off the whole time as being weak and rubbish. Well, why would Putin keep them there? Because actually he needs to keep weak leaders in place because they are no threat to him. There's no way you would ever imagine Shoigu or Gerasimov doing a coup and running for president, or taking over. It's just they're not that kind of leader, because they're not that effective, and that's precisely why they are in position. But of course, the problem is if you have less effective people in important positions, yes, they're not going to threaten you, but they're also going to be fairly incompetent at doing their job. So it's a double-edged sword, that one. And lo and behold, it appears that the ones in charge of the army particularly are not so competent. And when they were competent, people like Surovikin and Prigozhin, as much as you may despise them as moral or immoral human beings, they were fairly competent at what they were setting out to do. And one of them's dead, and the other one's somewhere in Algeria at the moment. So that kind of feeds into that idea. So Dmitry Gudkov's crime is to tell the truth about events in Bucha early in the war, likening events in Ukraine to genocide. Yeah, well, I would be pretty safe in predicting he would be not long for the world, or not long for the free world at the least. Okay, here's no report saying since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has committed 2,500 environmental crimes. First Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the Economy of Ukraine, Yulia Sergyenko, said during the United for Nature conference, quote, "They brutally kill Ukrainians, they destroy our cities and villages, they destroy our forests, our great natural resources, fields and lakes. They are destroying roads and buildings, they are destroying the water supply system. 1 million Ukrainians lost access to drinking water, 100,000 residents in 80 settlements were affected by flooding, and 140,000 were left without electricity when Russia blew up the Kakhovka Dam," she emphasized. These are issues that aren't just about biodiversity and the environment, but also in the way that the environment affects humanity. So the human geography of, connected to the physical geography. So as she says, affecting the water supply, affecting electricity supply, so on and so forth. I mean, goodness, we could list the absolute, the despicable list of things that the Russia has affected. You can talk about dolphins dying in the Black Sea. You can talk about the dam being blown up and the effect on the ecosystems that has had, and the draining of the Zaporizhia reservoir. You can talk about heavy metal being left all over the fields and the shells and the bombing. And yes, Ukraine will be part of that as well, but it's a necessary evil, isn't it, in defending their own land? They have to kind of poison it at the same time. Just the whole thing is just terrible. And what Russia have done isn't just a human catastrophe, it's an environmental catastrophe as well. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, mate.
I'm, I'm just going to actually relay an actual conversation that I had with my son probably 6 months ago when he was talking about wanting to go back for a holiday. And I was actually just saying, well, what are you going to do? And he's like, we can go for a walk in the forest and things like that. And it's like, no, we can't. The Russians have been putting anti-personnel mines all through the forest 50 meters from our house. There was a little water reservoir just down the hill. They destroyed that. They've been taking out anything they can to degrade Ukraine's, I'd say, long-term economic stability. All the infrastructure that costs a hell of a lot of money to set up. Russia's been intentionally targeting it to destroy Ukraine as a country for 20 years, for 30 years. It's almost like they've gone, we may not win the war this time, but next time we will. Almost like Dr. Claw on the end of Inspector Gadget, with his, if you remember, he was always, next time, Gadget, next time,
Gadget, next time.
So it's almost like Putin's in his chair doing that, if you can imagine Putin stroking a cat. And it's almost like, we'll degrade Ukraine.
Like he's that classically evil.
Yes.
Not that anyone that strokes cat is by extension evil, by the way. Any cat lovers out there. By the way, this is the point of fact that this is a second Gadget reference that's been made in one of my videos, as someone pointed out. Someone congratulated me once for a Gadget reference.
Can we get Danger Mouse in here?
Oh, now you're talking. Although Americans would be going, what are you talking about? So this is interesting bit of a nuggetry here. That's not a word. Ukraine is one of the most educated nations in the world, although it used to be, and then Matt left. And now it's not.
Yeah. Now it's not.
See what I did there, mate?
I always say my wife is the smart one in this relationship. So,
Very cool. The country ranks 4th in the world by the number of most educated population. 99.4% of Ukrainians aged 15 and older can read and write. 70% of Ukrainian adults have secondary or higher education. And I wonder the effect actually on this war. Sorry, the effect this war will have on education in general. Results, and I've talked a couple of times previously about the psychological effect on children and mental health, and how that will affect education and aspiration and jobs and productivity and everything going forward. Wars aren't just about physical health, and they aren't just about the health of those directly involved, as in fighting on the front lines. The impact on people, people like Matt and his wife having and child having to move through escaping to Romania into Australia, and the knock-on effects that the war is probably still having on them as humans. And you can map this out through the whole of Ukraine and through diaspora communities of Ukrainians and refugee communities. It's a big thing and with a big effect.
You've got to add the couple of years of COVID before that. So you've actually got now like a 5-year break in education. But
Right.
I just thought I'd be a proud dad moment for a second here, and everyone's just going to have to put up with me. We actually got an email from my son's school coming back the other day from his English teacher saying just how wonderful he was and how impressed she was. And, she's like saying, oh, it's to him, it's so amazing you speak 2 languages. And he's like, 3 actually,
So I remember teaching a kid sometime back, right? And this kid had written. This kid had just got back from India, had been in the UK, then gone back to India for like 3 years or something, and come back to the UK, and had done some writing. And I was like, right, this kid has just written stuff that is grammatically better than all of you other kids. So looking at all the other kind of indigenous British kids in the class, I was like, this kid's done better. And English is his second language. I mean, you guys should be ashamed. And he went, excuse me. I was like, yeah, actually, it's my third language. I was like, boom, drop mic. It's like, it's not even his second language, his third language. He's still smacked you guys. Anyway, oh no, that was not what I meant to put up. I put the wrong one up, which was, okay. Alo saying we need some of those excellent Ukrainian teachers in the UK. Now, interesting. I've got a friend. I was a teacher. My friend who's still teaching. Her dad has got a Ukrainian family staying with him, and she has gone and got a teaching assistant's job. She's like well overqualified for being a teaching assistant in the UK. These are people who help in classes, but then I can tell you as a teacher, they end up getting more and more responsibility. But she's really struggling with the UK secondary education system, with basically, I think, kids just being horrible. And like, it's not her job, and coming over and she, trying a hand at teaching, being a teaching assistant in the UK, but she's doing a really good job at it. But just like, yeah, I think it was quite an eye opener, UK secondary education compared to wherever she was in Ukraine. But
there's the old one of the things I always loved about Ukraine is there was that old style respect for an educated person, and I don't mean to degrade anyone. I mean, I started off my working life becoming a mechanic, so on the tools every day. I just chose to go a different way in life. But there's a respect for education that you don't see in the West. There's still idolization of their authors and things like that. I mean, like, in English we idolize Shakespeare and all that, but it's kind of like we acknowledge that Shakespeare was wonderful, but how many people can actually get through a Shakespeare play without pulling out their hair? But in Ukraine, they do still think that being smart, being intelligent is something vitally important. So yeah, people that think in Ukraine are treated a lot better, shall we say.
It's a really interesting point. Actually, it's a complaint in teaching in the UK is that it's not held in high enough regard, like culturally and societally, like it used to be. And certain countries around the world where it still is, you might reflect this in pay and all sorts of other ways. So, but it's interesting comparing teaching in different countries. Anyway, that's a complete sidebar there. Lawrence 22, thank you, mate. What a ledge. He's always so generous and helpful with specifically gifting memberships.
And you missed S.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Don't worry.
Yep. Oh, sorry.
That's,
I'll shut up. I'll shut up.
No worries. And thank you, Tom MPS, who says, when are you going to Ukraine? This is something I was talking about again recently. So I was talking to Pierre, who was briefly on that, where I was speaking to Anton from the Base UA charity, that not from that, he kind of started it. And Pierre was saying, look, mate, you need to come to Ukraine. And it is something that, like, originally I was like, no, I just can't do that. But now there's a little bit inside me that is like, do you know what a great goal to set. So I think I'm going to set that as a goal, and it's just a case of kind of when is that doable, and post-war, and where and how, and all those things. And my health, like my walking isn't very good at the moment at all, and all that kind of stuff.
I've said before,
so, as you said, Matt,
you set the day, I'll push you.
Yeah, nice one, brother.
Even up the cobblestone hills.
Yeah. I'll hold you to that, mate. Cool. Thank you, by the way, Tom. I really appreciate that. Right. So going on to the Kyiv Independent here, saying the ISW, quoting from the ISW, or praising what they say. Russian forces are struggling to hinder Ukrainian resupply, reinforcement in eastern Kherson Oblast. So this is going back to the Dnipro River area. Ukrainian ground forces are reportedly engaged in efforts to secure the village of Krinky, some 30 kilometers northeast of Kherson and just 2 kilometers from the Dnipro River. The ISW said, if successful, the control of this settlement would provide forward units with a strategic foothold to initiate a broader offensive strategy with the goal of dividing Russian forces and disrupting their supply routes. Right. This is an opportunity for me to talk about how, yet again, and this, connects back to what I was talking about with regard to Russian equipment losses. They don't have counter battery, and there have been complaints in this particular area explicitly from Russians that they just don't have counter battery fire. What is counter battery fire? If you fire your artillery, counter battery fire has radar and ways of mapping the trajectory of the munition fired from your artillery, and it says, right, if it has that trajectory and landed here, then we can tell that the artillery is over there. If you've got towed artillery, it's likely that artillery isn't going to do shoot and scoot. So it's going to fire and then it stayed there, and that's where it's set up. Not all the time, but it seems that anyway, I'll get onto this. So you map where that came from, and then you hit that target with your artillery, which is why you kind of need to, if there is good counter battery fire, you need to get your artillery out of the way within 3 to 6 minutes, because otherwise you're going to have a shell landing on your head. So shoot and scoot with self-propelled artillery, which means you can fire and then get your tracked or wheeled vehicle out of there, fire again, move it again, so on and so forth. You keep doing that, you're far less likely to be hit. So what's happened is because the Russian artillery has been so degraded by Ukrainian drone and artillery counter battery fire themselves, that they are, and indeed they're using HIMARS for that too. They are having to resort to two things. One initially was things like Lancets. So Lancets became their way of doing counter battery fire. Lancets are your loitering munitions that can go and look around. So instead of mapping the trajectory of shells, you are just searching around for artillery or any bit of equipment, and then you go and blow it up. And the other thing they are now doing is, instead of using counter battery fire or supporting artillery fire, it's not just counter battery fire, it's just artillery fire. They are using aviation bombs. So the FAB, KAB 500 bombs. And Kherson is an area where they're doing this an awful lot. So they have a lack of counter battery fire, but they're making up with it to some degree with bombs dropped from airframes, and those are big, sizable bombs that are hitting places like Krinky and Poima, and where the Ukrainians have got some footholds. And of course, they're trying to push them back. But the idea here from the ISW is that the Ukrainians are still able to still able to get their supplies to these forces. So it's not as effective, perhaps, these big aerial bombs as they would like it to be. Have you got anything to say on that?
I think the Ukrainian forces are actually keeping it on purpose a very fluid front line there, where they're actually very, very mobile. And I can't remember who it was, but someone was made the comment the other day of the soldiers weren't carrying shovels that were going over. So they're
Right.
not digging in. So it's going to be a move, make yourself known, move, make yourself known, move, make yourself known. So the Russians don't know where to hit.
Good point.
And hopefully, because again, if they're going to be attacking the one spot and the Russian airframes are coming into the one spot, the Ukrainians are going to start tracking that and then working out how they can intercept those airframes. So it's that endless game of chess, which is what war is. The endless game of chess of just trying to get your opponent to do what you want so you can take them down.
And of course, the issue is that the range that the Russian pilots can fire those bombs from. So, some people say as much as 70 kilometers. Well, of course, if you're doing that, then there's very little chance of being able to hit that airframe from your front lines, from where your air defense systems are. So you're unlikely to have air defense systems in place that close to the front line that would be able to hit those. What are you going to say?
I was going to say it was George's. Smithy actually said it. Smith
Mm.
actually said it was George's. The I can't remember where he's from.
So,
No, he's not Estonian. Latvian.
oh right, Georgie from Ukraine Matters. Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, yeah, he's
yeah,
actually Danish.
Danish. Oh,
Yeah, I
no,
think
I
so.
thought he was working in. No, he works in Ukraine, doesn't he? And but
I'm
he comes
I'm
from
pretty sure
Lat.
he's. I thought he was Danish, but yeah, I could be wrong, or maybe he's
I don't know.
working down.
I can easily be
But
wrong.
50, yeah, 50 to 70 kilometers, releasing those bombs from that range, it just means you are basically untouchable. And they seem to be able to do that with impunity. Is not often you hear of a plane being shot down
Latvian.
that far. Is it? Is he Latvian?
Yep,
Interesting.
yep.
I stand
Sorry.
corrected. I can't
That's
use.
from Mark.
I was genuinely wrong there, which means that I can't use my usual quip, which is I was wrong once. It's when I thought I made a mistake, and that's my pat gag for never being wrong. Um, so Russia employs new tactics near Avdiivka, says Euromaidan Press. Ukrainian army spokesperson said Russian troops use robotic vehicles and dig tunnels to get close to the Ukrainian positions. I reported on this yesterday, but I was wondering myself how they dig these tunnels. So the claim was the Russians in the Avdiivka area are building tunnels, digging tunnels. I was just thinking, like, you can't expect your troops who are really low morale, on the edge and whatnot, to dig like tunnels that are, there have to be meaningful tunnels to get close to the opposition, or to come out behind them and do something. You can't just dig like a tunnel that's 10 meters. But you think how long it would take to dig a tunnel as a human with a shovel, like in cold earth, blah blah blah. And so therefore they have to have some kind of machinery to do that, to make it meaningful tunnels. But you can't get, what kind of machinery can build a tunnel that won't be easily hit? And if it's robotic stuff, much smaller robotic stuff, then actually I could understand that. But yeah.
You're going to have huge problems around Advika doing tunneling because it's coal territory. So there's going to be tunnels absolutely everywhere. So as soon as you start digging, you're going to be collapsing into old coal tunnels, which,
Interesting.
if I remember correctly, builds up natural gas, doesn't it? So they explode.
Who
Or
knows?
coal gas or something.
Get the canaries
Maybe.
out.
Yeah. Well, maybe we've got someone who's in that field who can comment.
So that is the bits and pieces. We're moving on to military aid. Not a huge amount in this segment. According to Air Force spokesman Yuri Ignat, the Ukrainian pilots selected for F-16 training have completed their homework and are now at the transfer stage to real F-16s in the near future. That's good news. I wonder how long that stage of the training will take, but obviously the sooner they can get these onto or into the Ukrainian airspace, the better. I still am hoping for Gripen to be sent to Ukraine and used by the Ukrainian Air Force, because I think there'll be a real boon for the Ukrainians. But obviously, F-16s would be great. They're still looking at the stats. So part of the issue with, or one of the main issues with Ukrainian airframes at the moment, is that even though they're using the same airframes as the Russians, they have older, worse, like, radars on them. And specifically, if they're using the older, like, MiGs and whatnot, and the rockets, the missiles they have have less range than the Russian missiles. So they might be using at times the same airframes, but they have less capability than the Russian airframes, like whether they be Su-25s or whatever. And this means that the Ukrainian airframes have to sit further back, are less able to do what the Russian airframes. They can't get as close to the front line because of the air-to-air missiles that beyond, visual, beyond, what is it? Beyond visual horizon? No, what's the phrase? Anyway, the Russians can shoot at the Ukrainians without needing to see them necessarily at a greater distance than the Ukrainians can shoot the Russians. So that means the Ukrainian planes have to be further back and are less able to do useful things. So the F-16s have better capability with with radar and missiles, but I still think their missiles are slightly under what the Russian missiles can do. Although I think their radio systems, especially with Link 16, which allows them to link radar to the rest of the systems in and around wherever they're flying, so they can be linked into a greater capability. All that NATO stuff they can link to it, but I still don't know that the range of their air-to-air missiles matches the Russian air-to-air missiles, but I'm sure someone can put me straight on that. Right, moving on from that, Ukrainian soldiers received updated Canadian-made Senator and mine-resistant ambush protection armored vehicles. MRAPs are vehicles that usually have a V-shaped hull, and they sit higher off the ground, so the wheels and the chassis is just higher, and that means that the explosion of a mine can dissipate more. The distance between the explosion and the vehicle is greater, so less explosion on the chassis, but also being a V-shaped chassis can be projected out to the sides more. So that's one of the ways that MRAPs can protect the inhabitants, the crew from the mine more. Often it's not a case of saying the MRAP will survive 100% and then carry on to drive. The key to an MRAP is that the people inside survive. So it may be taken out, but the people will survive to fight another day. And we're seeing this with Bradleys and a lot of the NATO equipment that might get damaged beyond repair, but the key is the people inside are saved. This updated model has improved mine protection, which provides additional benefits. I mean, the Senator is a Canadian made. In fact, the person that owns the company that Rochelle, I think it is a Canadian Ukrainian, and they've actually employed lots of Ukrainian refugees or people that refugees from Ukraine to help in the factories, I think, which is great. The Senator, if I remember correctly, was initially designed as a vehicle that transports, what do you call them? This is my MS brain just losing it. Matt, what do you call the vehicles that transport money from armored
security
vehicles?
van?
Yeah, security vans and armored vehicles. That's what it is. Security armored vehicle that takes money from banks and whatnot, and it's being kind of co-opted into military usage, as far as I understand it. Anyway, the Canadians have given a whole bunch of these, and they're starting to turn up on the front line or in Ukraine with more frequency. The updated model has improved mine protection, which provides additional benefits for the military in performing various combat missions. It's noted that the armored vehicles were supplied by Rochelle Smart Armored Vehicles, as mentioned. So that's good news. Germany has budgeted 4 billion euros for military aid to Ukraine in 2024. The German MOD sounds the alarm and states that this is not enough to fulfill German promises. The budget will be finally approved in mid-November. Until then, there will be negotiations. I don't know if this is part of their defense budget that I reported previously, which was something like 6 billion and was an increase, and most of that was going to go towards Ukraine. So I think that is part of that. But Germany, as I keep saying, have really turned up to the party, and they are dancing to the tune of the Ukrainian accordion player, and that is awesome. Norway will increase aid to Ukraine in the energy sector by $6.75 billion. The press service of the Ukraine Ministry of Energy has said, which is fantastic. As someone says here, Norway was one of the saviors when Russia closed the gas exports last winter. We shipped a lot of gas to Europe to help, but with that, we also get a ton of cash from selling the gas, so it's only fair we give back. Hope to see more from Norway in the future too. What a brilliant way of being part of the global society there. It's only fair we give back. I love that kind of giving nature. It's not just about positives for us. Thank you so much for Peter Vinker. Thanks again for all your work, Jonathan. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Peter. And I appreciate your appreciation of what I do. And so we can continue in that cycle. No, thanks, mate. Really appreciate that. I was in danger of just going off on one then. Russia started, it's not unusual. Russia started using drones with engines from AliExpress. So AliExpress, for those who don't know, is a Chinese eBay or Amazon. But they are still dangerous, Yuri Ihnat, the spokesman of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, has said, quote, actually, the engines were bought there from AliExpress, and the enemy will use them in this way. This is not the first time when this plane is molded from simple materials, as I say, from sticks, and launched in the direction of our country, said the spokesperson of the Air Force. In other words, AliExpress, I mean, it's just a shop, isn't it, where manufacturers can sell their wares. They are selling engines online, and of course Russians can buy them, or people can buy them and send them to Russia, and they end up on Russian drones of various models.
And because Russia doesn't care about collateral damage of civilians, they don't have to be accurate.
Yes, that is one of the things. I mean, this is one of the theories. Thanks for that, Matt, because it's one of the theories about the electronic warfare jamming of the JDAMs. The JDAMs in the FAB 500s are basically, parallel munitions. But one theory is that the JDAMs have been successfully electronically jammed more because of the safety mechanisms or the mechanisms they have on them, so that they don't blow up civilians. For example, they don't have collateral damage associated with them. So if a JDAM goes off course and it is not going to hit its intended target, a bit like you have with Storm Shadow cruise missiles and scouts, if they're not going to hit their target, they can fly off to somewhere else, a designated safe space, and just hit there instead. So a field. So I think that they program in the targeting so that if something goes wrong, it goes off and hits a field, rather than doesn't quite hit there, but goes 100 meters to the right and then just hits a school or something like that. Now, with the JDAMs, if they get electronically jammed, the fuse is kind of disconnected. And as far as I understand it, or at least one theory is they go off, they miss their target and they don't blow up. But the FAB 500s don't have that. The Russians aren't too bothered about that, as you were kind of saying, Matt. They're like, they would then just go, oh dear, we've been jammed, or the GPS has gone wrong. We're just going to go 50 meters or 200 meters that way, and we're still going to explode with a massive explosion. Now, if you're aiming at the front line, that's still possibly going to have some good effect for you as a Russian army or air force. You're going to be sending in this FAB 500 bomb. It gets jammed a little bit, but it lands 200 meters away, where it's still going to blow up Ukrainian troops or trench lines or whatever. Whereas a JDAM doesn't, and that's possibly, it's only a theory that I've heard. I don't know how definitely true this is, but it could be why the JDAMs have been less successful, because actually they're just better at being safer than the FAB 500s.
It is an interesting thing, though, isn't it, that we've got the West have built these weapons, Storm Shadow, whether it's JDAMs, whatever, that will voluntarily go and be safe. It's kind of like this irony in a war. We're trying to kill the enemy, but we want our bombs to be safe, which really gives you an idea of what type of wars the West have been expecting to be fighting over the last 30 years, where they really needed accuracy.
Yeah, so we've seen that evolution in the Western weapons, that they've gone for precision, and it's why at the beginning of the war they said that the US would have, I don't know, 90% precision munitions on board their airframes and 10% dumb munitions, and the Russians had 90% dumb munitions and 10% precision. The Western evolution of weaponry seems to have been to spend more money, have more expensive, more precise weapons that mean that you don't have to send. And it's kind of an economy. It's a false economy, isn't it? That, these dumb munitions are much cheaper, so we use them. Well, actually, you need to use 20 more of them to do the same thing as a one precise munition will do. But the Russians don't really care about that, because they don't care about that. Or it seems, I don't know if I'm being unfair, but it appears from this war, they don't care about collateral damage. So let's flatten whole areas. And we don't need precision, whereas the Americans and Western nations are like, no, precision is much better, because you're going to kill what you want to kill, or take out what you want to take out, and you're not going to have to try and explain in the media why you've blown up a school full of children or something like that. Here we have two Stugner Ps, a twin launcher. So the Stugner is an anti-tank guided missile that can fire, actually has been known to hit up to 6 kilometers in some cases. It's a really effective, the skiff made by a Ukrainian company. Its headquarters were in Liman, but then they were obviously Liman was taken over originally. That's up in the Kharkiv area. Is it? No, it's in Izium, not Liman. The headquarters, I think, were in Izium, and then that was taken over. But I think they are making them now in the west, so they are still making them. They have been really, really effective. They're a two-man thing where you have your monitor, and then up to 50 meters away you have the launcher, and then you guide it with kind of infrared guidance, and it hits the target. And they've been really effective. Well, to have two on top of a Humvee is pretty cool. So that we're seeing a lot of these kind of Frankenstein type vehicles. As you can see there, they're clearly not designed to be together. You've got two slightly different variants just bolted on top. But hey, it doesn't matter. It does the job, what you'd hope. So that's good news. And then now we're moving on to, unless you've got any other military aid or any other things you want to share, Matt?
Nope.
No. Can I just say an absolutely phenomenal thanks here to SRUSA 54. Thanks for all that you do. Thank you. I mean, it is insanely generous of you, but thank you. I massively appreciate that. It literally allows me to do what I do, which is great. So thank you. Anton Geraschenko says here, and this is doing the rounds this morning, Russian businessman Magomed Musayev, known for his ownership of the Russian language versions of Forbes and Harvard's Business Review magazines, as well as his ties to the Kremlin, has become the owner of the American Forbes magazine, one of the most influential and well-known economic publications in the world. Information about this was reported by the Washington Post, citing audio and video recordings in which Musayev informs his partners about the acquisition of the company. In one of the recordings, he calls the acquisition a chance to strengthen his and Russia's international prestige. Oof, that's controversial. Forbes is officially owned by 28-year-old American billionaire Austin Russell. Axios reported in May, citing anonymous sources, that Magomed Musayev had engaged Russell in the process of acquiring Forbes, but at the time, Musayev was not mentioned as an investor or buyer of the media group. In August, two Republican senators sent a letter to the head of the U.S. Treasury Department and the Committee on Foreign Investment calling for a review of the Russell deal, claiming that he was masquerading as a lead buyer. The senators pointed out that much of the money to buy Forbes comes from investors with international ties, including ties to the Kremlin. Musayev himself claims that he did not coordinate this deal with Russian officials. Nevertheless, according to some sources, his successful career has much to do with the influential connections of his father-in-law, the former head of Dagestan, Ramazan Abdullatipov. One of the senators pointed out that it is not in the US's interest for major US media outlets to be run by organizations with ties to countries such as Russia. I mean, all of that appears to be pretty decent, verifiable worry concerning these kind of acquisitions. In the UK, that would be, I'm pretty sure that would be looked into quite strongly by the regulatory organizations we have to do that. I don't know what it's like in the US, because there are this idea in the US of the free market, the unregulated free market being preferred by a lot of people, and so people shy away from regulation. But this is one of those times where you'd be like, I'm all for the free market and people buying what they want and blah blah blah, but not really sure about media organizations being run by people with ties to the Kremlin. Yeah, maybe we won't let that one go. So anyway, interesting. Keep an eye on that one, I guess. Moving on, the president of Moldova met the elected president of Belarus. Now, I find this fascinating. This is the future of Europe. This is a glimpse of the better world we will have after Ukraine's victory over the Russian fascist invaders. Now, we know Lukashenko, Belarus, not great, right? But if you can have influence within Belarus from someone that is definitely pro-European. So we've got Maya Sandu, who is the president of Moldova, who is definitely anti-Kremlin, but Moldova is that interesting kind of middle place between Russia and the West. You've got Transnistria as this annexed area to its east. that if you're going to have someone to try and seed some kind of influence within places like Belarus to try and get it maybe towards the West, this is the great choice of person to go. Not that the EU is choosing or the West is choosing her to do this. This may well be fully off her own back, of course, but I think this is good. That kind of politicking. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the matter, but I'll just read this first. So, thank you for receiving me in Moldova. So this isn't Lukashenko, but this is Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, who is president-elect of Belarus. So I don't know if this is the opposition leader in exile, but your courageous leadership is steering Moldova towards a brighter European future. Today, we are starting the new chapter in our relationship based on common values, freedom, democracy, and respect for human rights. I think Moldova is a really useful country in terms of having influence in that whole region, given Transnistria and as I say, the Russian influence. But Belarus, I know, if it is the exiled leader, which I think it probably is, you wonder how much effect exiled leaders have in their own country, especially if there's a really tight control over domestic media. But it would be great if Belarusians could come around to the idea that maybe Lukashenko. I mean, I'm sure a lot of Belarusians do understand this. They did have a protest to Lukashenko taking control. It is, yeah. We think about Belarus being a real stalwart partner of Russia, but actually, even Lukashenko, I think, is only helping Russia as much as he absolutely has to, as far as Putin breathing down his neck and the threats to his own life that there have been, with, I think, the foreign minister being assassinated by Russia. So I think Lukashenko, he is a dictator, but he's not. He's only helping the minimum he can get away with doing. What are your views on Belarus?
It's sad. It really is. Belarus was actually doing its. I mean, because we were so close, getting the news when they're doing their protests, and Russia did. The Belarusian. If my wife is going to correct me here, because we say it Belarus, but for them it's different. There was the protesters were getting the upper hand, and then Russia sent in the troops, and that's what they tried in Maidan in Ukraine, but failed. So they sent in a lot more troops. They basically had the idea of, look, if we kill 50 or 100 of them, the Ukrainians will give up, and they didn't. But in Belarus, they went in, with a lot harder. And so Belarus, the Belarusian people I've met have all been really nice. And I think if they can get together with Moldova, which is also another desperately poor country from that region, I think if they can team up together and maybe find some way of supporting or getting the help of Ukraine, helping them and them helping Ukraine, then I think you'll get a whole swathe of land of people in this swathe of land that will actually benefit from it greatly.
I've wondered how much pushback there would be if Lukashenko had committed troops, Belarusian troops to the conflict in a way that Putin had clearly wanted. And I've often wondered whether actually you would get a lot of mutiny going on, a lot of people within the Belarusian armed forces. I don't know. I don't know how loyal they would be to Lukashenko and therefore to Putin, or how loyal they would be to the idea of Belarus.
From what we were being told at the time from people we knew around the area, if the order had actually come down, there would have been a revolution, pretty bluntly. The soldiers weren't going to invade Ukraine. You might have, obviously you're always going to get 1 in 10 or 1 in 100 that's going to go for it. but yeah, they were really, really resistant of it. There was also, I just want to interrupt, uh, Vic Victor 767 actually asked me a direct question of how are the common people in Ukraine holding up after the war. So when we finish, remind me to answer him if you could,
Yeah,
or
for
else
sure.
I'm going to forget.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure. No, always a good question, that one. And going back to Lukashenko, would know that his army would be feeling like that, and that's why he was reticent to do that. And he's been caught between a rock and a hard place, because on the one hand, he probably knows that what Russia's doing is wrong and not popular, but on the other hand, he's like, I'm just trying to put myself in his shoes here, that he's probably thinking, if I don't do this, I'm literally going to die. I've been warned very explicitly. My foreign minister has died and almost certainly assassinated by the Russians as a warning for me not to step out of line. And he also had some health problems as well, Lukashenko, which, I don't know exactly if that was at all connected to the Kremlin. So you can understand. Yeah, understand as in I can explain how we might not morally agree with it, but you can understand why he supported the Russian invasion to a degree, but then said, I can't do any more than that, because if I do any more than that, I'm going to have a revolution. So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So interesting political situation. Phillips O'Brien here says, speaking of how the stalemate narrative is so flawed, the 33rd ship has just successfully transported Ukrainian grain from a Ukrainian harbour, and the Russians have been unable to stop it. That seems to have taken off, actually, because the last I looked, there were 7 that had gone down that corridor, hugging the land in the Black Sea, down from the Odessa region, down past Romanian coastline, past Bulgarian coastline, and out through the Bosphorus Straits. If 33 boats have done that, ships have done that, although that's probably not the volume and the speed with which they would be, well, which they would like, but it's still something that's excellent. And there are now so many different options. There are the railway options. There's a Danube option, the road, and also was it Lithuania that was talking, or one of the might be Latvia, talking about another route out from the Baltic. So there are loads of options that are available to the Ukrainians. Unfortunately, they're not as efficient as the Black Sea option, so that will incur extra costs, and volumes won't be as high. But it is still really good that people are coming together and lubricating the cogs of grain exports. Japan is launching a new program to support Ukrainian refugees in the spring to help them adapt to life in the country, according to the Japan Times. The program includes language learning and monetary benefits. Also, within the framework of the program, you can familiarize yourself with the laws and customs of the country. So Japan, it seems odd that they're now doing a program to support Ukrainian refugees a year and a half after the start of the war. But nonetheless, I guess that's a positive move.
It's that's actually really needed in my opinion, JB,
Really?
because
Yeah.
refugees are getting. Let me see. People are getting fed up in Europe of the Ukrainian refugees. At least that's what I'm being told by my Ukrainian refugees. Is they're getting a lot more. One of our friends just got put in by the government because the French government gives them accommodation, and now they've actually moved them to the outskirts of the city where they're in, made them share with someone else, and she's got a young son. And half you sit there going, well, I can understand both ways. Um, but yeah, there seems to be this kind of more of a feeling of, well, when's this going to be over, coming
Yeah.
from people.
Yeah.
So actually, yeah, some staggering in countries like Australia, who opened their doors, who or they said, look, we'll let in 10,000 Ukrainians. Now you're actually being asked, or you're told that the avenue what was originally offered is now shut, to stay. And like I've said before, like we've just spent 13,000 to be able to apply for my wife to stay. And as a refugee, where do you come up with 13,000? So there's I think going to be a lot of problems going forward for the Ukrainian refugees.
Yeah, well,
Um,
good news then for Japan for doing that. Um,
mm,
uh, so football, UEFA, and to explain this to my, particularly, I guess, my American viewers here. So many American viewers probably won't realize what football support is like in Europe, in the UK, in Europe, in particularly, and how crowds are pretty hardcore, mainly men, uh, traditionally mainly white men, shouting very angrily. And there has been a history of football hooliganism. You would have heard about that. And in the 80s, the 70s and 80s, and a little bit into the 90s, involved racism. And then that's been sort of cleaned out of it. And then you have things put in place like if your crowd says, is chanting really inappropriate stuff, then if there's an investigation that finds that that's happened, you can get fined, right? Your club can get fined for the behavior of your fans. Okay, you as a club are responsible for your fans, and if your fans do things like throw stuff on the pitch or do overtly racist stuff or whatever, they can get fined. So then we've got this interesting situation where UEFA has fined Lithuania, so the national team, for anti-Putin football chants. So the Lithuanian Football Federation has appealed a $10,600 fine issued by UEFA, so UEFA is European Football Association, after fans chanted derogatory slogans about Russian dictator Vladimir Putin during a match. Lithuanian media outlet LRT said, quote, "All fans and Lithuania unitedly support this chant," Lithuanian Football Federation President Edgaras Stankevičius said, referring to a popular obscenity that uses Putin's name. This is going back to a song or a Ukrainian thing. You probably know this more than I do, Matt, about the word for Putin, which
Julio,
is which is the expletive, which is a male
I've got
genitalia.
it.
Is
I've
it
still
correct?
got it on the T-shirt. Did I ever wear it on the T-shirt for you in the chat?
You did, yeah, you
You
did
did,
once,
yeah, yeah,
I think.
yeah.
Yeah, so this is a famous expletive for Putin, and they've obviously made a chant of that. Or there is a chant, there is a bit of a song, and to have them fined for that, I don't know what I think about this. I do know what I think about this. It's wrong. Like I don't have a problem with the Lithuanian football teams chanting expletives about Putin. I don't think I'd class that in the same. I don't know how they've got away with doing this, whether they can successfully put that in the same kind of category as racism. It is a lot of people chanting against one person in particular. Is that I'm putting my philosopher's hat on here and wondering how that would work in terms of like oppressive kind of speech, hate speech, and whatnot. But when you've got someone that's indiscriminately bombing civilian populations, my sympathies for Putin kind of run a little bit empty. I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
I say we just do a GoFundus for this Lithuanian Football Federation.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah.
So we know what your thoughts are, mate. Yeah, yeah. As he wears a t-shirt with the same thing on. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
seriously, don't have a problem.
Where's I'm sorry. Where's the problem with me calling your leader a bad
Yeah,
name when
yeah,
he's killing people?
yeah. I'm with
Yeah,
you on that, mate.
get
I'm
some
with you on that.
perspective.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Yep.
So, and the perspective is somewhat kind of illuminated here by what the New York Times World here says, drawing on more than 450 interviews. And I have reported this previously, but I wanted to just spend a minute or so saying how bloody important this is. So, drawing on more than 450 interviews, a UN report documented abuses such as the use of electric shocks against civilians, the rape of women ranging in age from 16 to 83. And in fact, there are many accounts of children receiving that treatment as well, and the transfer of unaccompanied Ukrainian children to Russian territory. Now, this is terrible. Some of the accounts in this report and many other reports are absolutely shocking. Be under no illusion. The Russians here throughout this war have been involved in institutionalized systemic or systematic committing of war crimes of the worst varieties. And this goes back to my usual question, is like looking at pro-Russian, pro-Kremlin voices. Are you on the right side? Now, if you're a paid up Kremlin troll, then I understand you saying stuff that makes sense. But when I have trolls who appear to be pro-Kremlin, but are not like Russian, and maybe not, and if they're not under the payroll of the Kremlin, what are you doing? Where is your moral compass? How do you not understand the depths of depravity that have been reached by members of the Russian armed forces against Ukrainian civilians? It's just not acceptable. And for me, this kind of stuff makes it so much easier for me to be pro-Ukrainian, morally and politically speaking. I think for me, it is as simple as saying, and it's just odd because so much of my life is like all about saying, well, there's nuance here. There's nuance. Of course, you look at the Israel-Palestine conflict and you're like, well, that is just a big cluster excrement of nuance, right? And problems on both sides. But actually for the Ukraine-Russia conflict, it is much more simplistic as far as I'm concerned. It is Ukraine are the good guys, Russia the bad guys. And you know what? There are plenty of reports to support that. And here's one report from the UN of 450 interviews to support the notion that the Russians are committing a whole host of war crimes and a lot more than the Ukrainians. End of. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that before I rant more.
Your rant will be my warm up, JP.
Right? Yeah. I figured
you don't want to get me going down that. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No, don't get me going. Don't. It is just horrifying and I said before on one of your live streams, when you've got the young girls getting raped so much that the skin's being torn between the anus and the vagina, we've got
there. I
problems
was using
when we get to
euphemisms
that.
earlier. Yeah, there I was using
sorry
euphemisms.
if I get you blocked. If I get you blocked.
No, that's all right.
Well, to be honest,
that needs to be.
You've got to use the words because that's what you're confronting.
Yeah, you're right.
When we shy away from saying what it is, then we're almost playing their game. In that regard, it is horrific, and if you're supporting that, God help you. Even if you do or don't believe in God, whatever. Look in the mirror, please. We're getting comments of rants now.
Yeah. Hold myself back. To move on to Russian propaganda, I just wanted to remind people that war crimes are taking place consistently.
JP, just on that one.
Yeah.
If you ever want to do a realistic, to be able to see currently what those torture chambers were like, Lviv had the torture chamber from the USSR times. And I intend to take you there one day. We'll carry you down the stairs, just so you can, have that 1 minute of, oh crap, this is, mankind can really sink incredibly low. But I believe it's online, and there's photos of it online, and you can, because it happened 50 years ago, it's not quite as confronting, but it's still confronting enough to make you go, what the.
Yeah. I mean, there's as Yuli Lab here says, YouTube channel Silicon Curtain has an interview out with one of the Kyiv Independent founders. Kyiv Independent tracks war crimes, horrifying stories. Absolutely. And Just Me Hello says, would you interview the man who runs Insights from Ukraine and Russia? He has lots of war crimes from tapped phone calls. Absolutely, I would. I struggle sometimes. It's just time. Like, I'd love to just, if anyone, I know this is really cheeky of me, and I apologize, but if anyone can reach out to other people that you think I should interview. Just let me know, and I'll do it. It's just like finding time to do everything is really difficult. But of course I'll be well up for that interview. Russian propagandists attempt to absurdize the similarities of Hamas and Russia by comparing Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, to Osama bin Laden. I mean, this is, as Russia get hit with, Putin being given an arrest warrant by the ICC for what he's done in terms of trafficking children or deporting children even. And all the other things that I'm sure he'll get done for eventually. And as the media hit Russia with accusations of X, Y, and Z, they hit back with trying to do the same thing in reverse. But it's just like, I hope if I was a Russian citizen, I just see through this. Like, really, Ursula von der Leyen is Osama bin Laden? Come on, guys. Anyway, compared her to Osama bin Laden, international terrorist and former leader of the international Islamic terrorist organization Al Qaeda. So let's just go through this video. I'll read out the subtitles to you. Turn off the sound, as I'm not very good at that. Right, EU functionary Ursula von der Leyen and her companion Charles Michel are already in the US for a meeting with Joe Biden. She says this is Skabieva. The situation, she's interviewing. The situation in the Middle East will be discussed, and a secondary agenda is now Ukraine. In addition, during a speech at Hudson University in Washington, gynecologist, I love, throw in, she's not EU Commission leader, she's gynecologist, Ursula von der Leyen, blurted out another Russophobic nonsense. And just so you can all see this properly, another Russophobic nonsense. It turns out that it is Russia that wants a full-scale war in the Middle East. Thus, Ursula repeated word for word after Biden. And then Ursula seems to be a lot like bin Laden. No. Why does it sound funny? I'll tell you why it sounds funny, because it's bonkers. And the idea that Russia is like Hamas doesn't sound funny. No, not really. Anyway, that's the kind of thing they do. Compare these, compare people in an attempt to do that kind of parallel, and I don't think it particularly works. They're pretty desperate, I think. As I've said, reporting this week that when you've got Skabieva herself going out to Pyongyang in North Korea and saying, "Hey, this is a great place. This is fine to go on holiday here," that your country is screwed if you're trying to sell holidays to Pyongyang. Meanwhile, you've got the North Korean authorities following you around saying, "You can't film that. You can't film that. You can't say that." Just, whatever. And on this subject of propagandists, so this is a chap who is on Solovyev's channel. Solovyev, remember, is the propagandist who's actually Jewish. And I hadn't actually realized why he would have particularly got sacked for this. So he was on Solovyev's channel and then badmouthed some people like Zakharova, who is the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and another Russian entity as well, badmouthed them in public, or in this interview actually, on a YouTube channel, and then has been sacked. And I was saying this represents fractures that exist in the information space in Russia. And I think it is interesting where you're starting to see this, and you wouldn't see this as if everything was going well for Russia. If they were fighting a war that was successful and they were doing a good job of it, you just wouldn't see stuff like this. And now you're seeing a lot of people not towing the party line with regard to narratives, and people speaking out of turn and getting sacked. Here, quote, "Russia will fall apart in the 30s, so the 2030s. This is him saying this. Putin won't live forever, and he can't hire good staff. That means he'll put some small, weak shite in his place." Medvedev was an example. As this is what Satanovsky claimed. He was fired by Solovyev after criticizing Zakharova. So he is saying things that are pretty controversial here, and as a result, gets sacked. But I think it's great. I think it's great to see fractures in the Russian information space, and hopefully these fractures will only get bigger as the Russian war project does worse and worse. Any comments on stuff like that or anything from the comment section?
I was just laughing. Sorry, John Clear, is it? Just actually says they can't keep Russia at the Olympics. Their soldiers can run the 4-minute mile while carrying a toilet. This is an awesome spectator sport.
That's good. Or you
Um,
can upgrade from toilet to fridge freezer. Like
yeah,
that's if you're proper good at it. Yeah, absolutely. Jack Ray, thank you very much for gifting memberships. It's really
Jack
very
Ray
generous.
and Lawrence did earlier. Did I?
Yes, I did say that. Yeah,
You did say that one? Yep.
but I'll thank him again because he's a legend and he deserves it.
Yep.
So thanks, mate. Thanks to both of you. So the last thing I'm going to do is just look at the map very quickly. I don't know the details to this though, so apologies. So we have, if you know my map, which you should do by now, and if you don't, get with the program. We have the Russian defensive lines. The blue line is Andrew Perpetua. Red line is Surat Maps, which is a pro-Russian mapper. Andrew Perpetua's map has some gains for the Russians in the Yahidny to Ivanivka area, which we have seen some success over the last week for the Russians there. They seem to be, although, I don't know, there are different claims around Sinkivka, the claims that the Russians have been pushed back north of Sinkivka. So I don't really know. There's the claims going both ways around there, but there's quite a bit of activity there. Quite a bit of activity here in this area, Yahidny, Ivanivka. Activity, it seems to calm down a little bit around Novoselivska, but still in the Novoherivka, Ryarodka area, we have activity in the Makeyivka area too. But it seems like, as much as the Russians are pushing, there's nothing too serious that's happened here. There's a lot of scaremonger. I don't know if scaremonger is fair. There's a lot of warning from Russian spokespeople like Yevlash, the Eastern grouping spokesperson, saying that there's 100,000 people up here. You know, be worried, be warned. And I don't know. I said previously it's a bit speculative, but sometimes you wonder whether these spokespeople are warning because they want to get central assistance much more than say, you know, we need to say it's scary up here, so we get the forces up here and the equipment up here instead of it going elsewhere. So they're kind of looking after their own area. I don't know if that's fair at all for me to say that, but there certainly is this idea that some of the people up here are saying we need to be wary of the Russians. Up here, they've got quite a number of forces. At the same time, the Ukrainians are doing well, it seems, in the south of Bakhmut, although no changes to the mapping here. Thanks so much again to JR, as I said already today. Seems to have gone quite quiet in this Seversk, northern Bakhmut area, though I'm sure there is activity. Places like Sperna, Berestova, the Russians did have some success there a couple of weeks ago. It seems to have gone quiet. But yeah, no changes to the mapping there, at least in the last 24 hours. Quite a bit of change to the Avdiivka area. So we've got some Ukrainians seem to be pushing north of Krasnohorivka, having some gains up here. But around the slag heap area, the Terikon area, Deep State map has the Russians pushing right up to that. Now, I did have a quote. I think it was, again, I do have it actually. It's on one of my sticky notes. Let me know what you think of Avdiivka while I find the quote, mate.
Sorry, I was reading a comment right in the middle of that. What was that about?
What do you think of what's going on in Avdiivka?
Actually, I'm incredibly proud and confident, I suppose, of the Ukrainian forces. Look at what they've absolutely destroyed.
Yeah.
Russia's shot itself in the foot. They've spent themselves. They might push through. They might lose another 50,000 troops or something trying to obtain it, but it's nothing special, you know, like we're seeing at the Russians at the moment.
Yeah.
If it falls, Ukrainians will be running behind, building up their defenses. So, you know, it's just stupidity, whether you want to believe the idea that it was meant to be a present for Putin or not. You know, Ukraine's got a whole pile of tunnels going under there to feed itself its ammo and that. So, yeah, it can hold out, even if Russia actually manages to do the pincer movement and cut off the road. They can apparently still keep fighting for a long time. So, yeah.
So yeah, and there's been this talk about the Terracon, the slag heap here, that Suryat maps, the red line has said was taken, then they walked it back, then they said it's been taken again, or maybe if it wasn't taken the first time, it has been taken now. But then Suryat maps, although the map they had there, it says heavy clashes are taking place now between Ukrainian and Russian army around the garbage hill. I don't know whether that's them saying that it hasn't actually been taken and there's fighting around it, or will they still think it has been taken and the fighting is taking place around here. I would err on the side of being dubious unless evidence is forthcoming that they have taken it. I'm not saying it hasn't been taken. I just think that Surat Maps has cried wolf too many times, and I doubt that that has been taken. But it's certainly deep state maps seem to say that the Russians are right up to it. So it is obviously pretty tough fighting around there. Then we have some Russian gains around here between Opitny and Vodziane. Just some gains for, again, deep state maps here, that kind of triangle, if you like, there. And then some Russian gains between Pervomaisky and Vodziane here. So deep state map changing the lines quite a bit. But then Suryat maps catching up, I think, with what happened a few days ago in terms of the Ukrainians making some gains in Pervomaisky. And I think that's fairly significant, because if you're worrying about making these gains all the way forward up here, as the Russians are, they're trying to make it desperately to Severny there. They're trying to move up here and up there as well. If you're then losing ground right behind those lines, then that's kind of like a bit dodgy. And you might want to redirect those forces to down here. So I think it would be quite clever for the Ukrainians if they make some inroads in behind them. But again, how quickly can Ukrainians do stuff like that? It requires an awful lot of troops, forces, equipment, and time. As we've seen so often in this war, territory gained often comes at great expense and is not quick. Just everywhere is defended so much by, even if it's not by humans in trenches, it's by mines and booby traps and aviation bombs and all sorts. Were you going to say something, mate?
No, I was being asked by John if I do any social media so he could follow, and I'm like, well, no, I don't. I'm only ever on here. So this is a plug. If you want to see me, you can only see me here on.
Yes, absolutely. And you're so good here as well. Thank you. Brett Golding, keep it up, JP. Your channel is awesome. Thank you very much. Sorry about the rugby. Go All Blacks. Yep, I am back in the All Blacks all the way. Sorry, South African friends. Sorry, not sorry. And Louise Foley, thank you very much. Thanks, another great live stream. Really appreciate Louise's consistent support. It's really great. So some gains around Priutne, as according to Suryat Maps. That was one that came in yesterday, just before I did my mapping, and I said I hadn't updated it, but I showed the Suryat Maps claim as just a tiny triangle there. But not a lot of movement elsewhere. So the Robotina area seems pretty static, and no extra updates from Kherson either from any of the mapping sources. But I haven't looked today. I don't know if I'll have time today to do an update to what JR has done, given extra sources coming out, extra claims coming out today. So I'll see what the Sunday does for me in terms of timing. But that's pretty much the Frontline update. AJ Simo, thank you so much. Donation to the travel fund for the post-war ATP members convoy to Ukraine. Brilliant stuff. Thanks, AJ Simo. And fun fact, I used to play rugby. I used to play a sport called Ultimate Frisbee as well, which is really diametrically opposed to rugby, but very cool sport and very cardiovascular energy fitness sport. Really cool. If you ever get to see Ultimate being played, it is great. I was at the World Beach Ultimate Championships in Rimini in Italy twice. Just thought I'd let you know that. Anyway, my nickname was Convoy, so there you go. That was on the back of my shirts. That's just a random bit of information.
We're all getting on Google now for that.
I'd go and look on YouTube at Ultimate Frisbee layouts and stuff. There's some great Americans. They've got a really robust league over there. Julie McFadden, thank you. 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships gifted. So many kind memberships. Really appreciate that. And Scott Brisson, love your videos. I watch every day. Slava Ukraini. Thank you very much, Scott. Really appreciate that. Awesome stuff. Really kind great kindness from everyone, really. So Marina, thank you for your Czech krona. Really appreciate that. It's incredibly generous. Thank you, Marina, for your kindness. And Matt, have you been cheekily gifting memberships?
Yep.
You're bloody here helping. Well, that's
Well, no, that's it. To keep people here, you see, I've got to
you're
pay them. I've got to pay people like John to say how wonderful I am. You see,
you
so
are
no.
you are wonderful, by the way. And thank you so much to Geopolitical, who I believe is in Germany at the moment with regard to going into Ukraine. So thank you so much for your support, and I'll be in touch with you. So GMT Politico, thank you. Thank you to everyone for your absolutely incredible kindness. Really, really appreciate it. Goodness me, SR USA and Mark Gould. And Marina, thank you. Particularly incredible stuff. Do you have anything to add to the live feed, my friend?
Yeah, I just want to quickly run back to, there was a question about what's the average Ukrainian
Yes,
feeling like a year
I'd
and a half
forgotten
into
all
the
that
war.
already.
Um, they're
He's
not
got
going to
no
give
answer.
up. No,
Yeah.
no, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to quickly summarize everyone that I spoke to. They're not going to give up. They're going to be fighting as long as needed. But I do have awesome news that my stepfather is, well, we're just in the process of applying for his visa, and hopefully he will be here in a month's time. So
Amazing,
we're
because he had health problems, didn't
really
he?
hopeful. He had, yeah. So he's been really good. He gave up smoking. He's been trying to get himself in shape for the traveling because he is older, um, and so he's trying to be good. So hopefully we'll get to see him because obviously it's not nice waking up every day wondering if he's dead or alive.
I mean, it's difficult for Ukrainians in general, isn't it? Because a year and a half is an awful long time to be on the edge, to be feeling that level of anxiety, to be feeling that level of loyalty and positivity for your government and for everything you're trying to do. And you can only keep that going so long before real life catches up and things normalize. And so there must be an interesting bunch of psychoanalysis one could do of Ukrainian citizens all over Ukraine as to how they are feeling about the war.
There's almost this, like when I talk to my wife about it, especially, there's almost this guilt that no one's trying to kill us. God, that sounds really, yeah. No one's trying to kill us, so we get a chance to get on with her life, and slowly build it up. So you've got the guilt of making your life better, you've got the guilt of surviving, and you've got that almost guilt of betrayal because you left. And so as a parent, the only thing you can do is leave with your child. That's your responsibility, but it doesn't mean that you don't feel less guilty or anything like that. But I think the average Ukrainian, I actually think they're doing well. They're going to keep fighting. It all comes down to, look at the war crimes, look at the torture centers. How do they surrender? They know what happens. Go spend 5 minutes on Google looking at what happened the last time they were occupied by Russia. How many millions died. So how do you surrender? You don't. So you just fight.
Yeah. I'm just to let people know, I'm hoping to do a panel live stream with people who are connected to Ukraine, but unfortunately all my guests stretch the entire world, and so one who has just been in Ukraine is going back to Japan. I haven't told him yet. Greybeard on Discord. I'm going to hopefully speak with him, maybe, and get you, Matt, on, and maybe someone else I don't know that's from maybe the Eastern Hemisphere as far as the UK is concerned. because obviously it just goes round and round, doesn't it? So
Hopefully.
the East. Someone was telling me the world's flat the other day, and I was thinking that sounds pretty good. No, so that time zone, and then I've got Mark and Elena, Mark Biscu from Canada, and possibly Pierre. If I can get Pierre, who was with Anton he's going back to Ukraine. He's been in Ukraine and back in the UK now, going back to Ukraine. And if I can get him and Mark and Elena, and maybe someone else on. So if you have connections to Ukraine, you have been in Ukraine, you are presently in Ukraine, or you have connections and you are confident enough and you have something to say that you think that can contribute to a live panel, where we'd be basically like Matt and I are doing at the moment. I don't bite. It's all right. It'll be hopefully nice and sort of relaxed in a way, but informative for other. If you've got something to say to other people, but there'll be safety of there being other people on the panel. Hopefully, going to have two. If you are on to the right of the UK, you'll be on one panel, and to the left of the UK, maybe on another panel. Please let me know. Reach out to me somehow, maybe on Discord, maybe on Twitter, maybe on the threads. I do try and read as many threads as I can. It's just really difficult. If I miss it, just keep trying to get that message to me, or reach out to maybe Matt. If Matt knows my email address and what, so it'll be great. It's just really difficult organizing it when everyone's in every different time zone. So apologies that hasn't happened already. Anyway, other than that, thank you so much to everyone for this live stream. Thank you to the very kind supporters in the live chat, to particularly Marina, SRUSA 54, and Mark Gould as well, and all the others. Really appreciated that. And I'll leave the last words for Matt.
Well, thanks. Leaving me on the spot again.
I love doing this, Matt. It's just great.
I know you.
I was doing what you asked me
do.
to do, which is read the comments, mate. And now you've asked me to say something. I can't read the comments and say stuff. Gee,
I know. You wait until my head's turned to see what I've missed, and
Brilliant.
then it's like,
I love
bang.
it. And it will happen again.
Yeah. No, I don't have a channel. Alexis down there. No, I don't think anyone would want to listen to me. So
okay. Well, thanks for that wonderful ending there, Matt. No, appreciate all your help, mate. Really do.
Thanks for the invite, and I'll see
worries.
everyone soon, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and Lawrence wants me to bring up you banning the trolls.
Yeah, so I have, funnily enough, Solid for Life, I keep saying I'm going to speak to him and have this debate with him, and then then the rest of the time I'm like, I just don't have time. I don't have time to prepare for that, and I don't want to make extra time to prepare for that, to have a big argument with someone.
I'll do a live with him. Me and him can have a live debate over it.
I ended up banning him, but I think I banned him on my other channel just because he said stuff that is just so unsubstantiated. I'm just so fed up of like saying stuff that just looks like you're paid by the Kremlin to say it, that is just so indefensible that I just don't have to. Do you know what? I just like, right, I'm sorry, you're banned. But I think I banned him on one channel, but he's still talking on another. But I'm not anti-troll in like, I do want to engage with them to present the correct side of the story. But sometimes I just get frustrated because I don't have all the time in the world, and I wish I did, because I'd love to sit down and have a good old argument. But yeah, so hopefully they're not too problematic in the threads. But yeah, it's something I'm struggling with, into how I deal with them. But anyway, but thank you for that.
They actually never bother me. I mean, and I think that's funny because every day I say good morning, and I would have thought I would have been a prime target for the trolls, but none of them want to actually engage in conversations. So, you just been out by Mr. Squiggle, by the way. Have you checked out at that Lviv girl with MS in Ukraine?
Oh, I might have to try and reach out to me and give me some more deets on that. That'd be fabulous. That'd be really cool. Thanks for hints like that. Really appreciate that. I've got to shoot to see my family, who are busy in the kitchen. Well, I say my family, my partner is busy cooking in the kitchen, is probably deeply angry inside with my absence. Thank you, everyone.
You're terrible, JP. I cooked before I came on stream.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
are your halo
Right.
is blinding me.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for the invite.
Nice
So,
one.
and
Take care,
hopefully we'll
everybody.
get on it again soon.
Yeah,
Thanks,
we'll do
everyone.
this again soon. Cheers to the pips.